Hello, and thank you for joining today. This is the MX Group's webinar on digital transformation and a marketer's guide to moving past obstacles to opportunity. I'm Suzanne Martin, and I'm going to be your moderator today, and I run marketing here at the MX Group. And remember, anytime during the session, you can send in your questions through the webinar app, and it's a great chance for you to connect with a couple of great experts today, so be sure to get those questions in, and we will handle Q&A at the end of the session. I'm pleased to welcome and join with us today Gil Canary, who is a research director from SiriusDecisions. Now, Gil brings to us 15 years of strategy experience spanning both marketing and technology management, and he's worked with many great brands ranging from Advanced Micro devices to Dell and 3M and Marriott. And joining Gil today will be Kevin Coe, and he's the Vice President of Digital Development and a partner here at the MX Group. And Kevin brings over 20 years of B2B marketing and technical experience to the conversation, and he leads our digital development teams and implements hundreds of interactive apps every year. Now, Kevin has unique experience at that crossroads of marketing and technology, and it's given him a unique perspective, which I think you'll find pretty interesting today as we discuss marketing's role in digital transformation. So, as to what we're going to be covering today, it is really at the heart of what most of you out there are surely really grappling with, which is how to ride that tsunami that is digital transformation in so many companies today. Now, there is a way to focus that big, wide expanse of digital transformation and zero it in on what it means for marketers, and we're going to do that today. And we're also going to cover, secondly, a challenge to an assumption that we have that getting leads to sales as quickly as possible is the goal. We actually think that there are benefits to extending digital engagement, and we're going to explain why today. And lastly, we're going to get very actionable with you and share 6 types of digital engagement tools that will help you actually make this real in your organization and really bring it to life. So Kevin, I thought we could start today with an explanation of what digital transformation really is and what it looks like. Sound good?
Sounds good. Great. Thanks, Suzanne. So first thing we'd like to do is just set a little context. What does digital transformation look like, and what really is it? And it's a fairly big umbrella in the organization as a whole. So part of the question we want to address here today is what is the portion of it that a marketer should own? But starting kind of definitionally, what is digital transformation? We really at MX think about it as digital transformation is really about speed. And there are some folks out there who say that really speed is the only competitive advantage that's left today because secrets don't really last very long. So in trying to deliver speed, though, what we're really trying to do is deliver speed to customer satisfaction. And that happens in lots of places throughout the entire organization, everywhere that you look. As we move to deliver that speed, we want to do it in an ideal way, which means that digital transformation is about speed to customer satisfaction, but without sacrifices. We don't want to just shovel things out the door because speed is good. We want to do it right, and that's what digital transformation really kind of brings to the table, is an ability to add benefits to the entire process without sacrifices. And the way we think of that is that as you use digital tools to add speed, what you're able to fundamentally deliver is better fit. Everything that you do for every customer can be a little more customized, a little more direct to what they need because you have these tools to move quickly through that process. You can do it to more customers. You can add scale in the process, and you can do it with less time and less cost. And what really gets important about that is that the combination of those factors lead to paradigm shifts. And that's why they really call it transformation. It's not just about adding speed. That wouldn't be transformation. The paradigm shift is where you can start doing things for your buyers, for your customers, for your prospects that were impractical before. Maybe you could imagine a way to do them with human labor and process, etc., but it takes digital to make them practical. A little relatable example I like to use is, for instance, on the B2C side, the Starbucks app. Basically, the app that they have today is, I think, a result of them asking a question, which is, like, what if all of our customer orders were perfectly customized exactly the way people wanted it without annoying conversations? They were ready before they even showed up in the store. And what if that even cost us less to deliver than it does today? Without digital transformation, these would almost be irrational questions. Like, that's ridiculous. But once you introduce digital transformation and people have the opportunity to order ahead of time and save their favorites and do that from anywhere and show up right about the time it's ready, all of a sudden the way the business works is transformed. And so that's how speed can bring paradigm shifts to the model. But digital transformation, as we said, is a big umbrella. It's really enterprise-wide, and it should shape every part of your organization. R&D, manufacturing, operations, marketing, sales, everything, really. And the goal is to achieve those paradigm shifts everywhere in the enterprise, and that's from the product or service all the way through enablement and support. And marketing, we feel, is a stakeholder in any place and every place where the buyer's experience is impacted. But the real question here for today is, what part of the digital transformation does the marketer actually own as opposed to just being a stakeholder?
When you look at marketing's role in digital transformation, it's important to note that for most buyers, marketing is the first person they're going to talk to, the first representative of the organization. So that makes sense that marketing should own that relationship with the buyer digitally from the point they first know of the company to the point where they become customers. And this actually fits really well with what the buyers are telling us. What you're looking at on the chart right now is a study that we did in 2015 to 1,000 plus B2B buyers. And we asked them about the nature, the number, and the type of interactions they had with the companies they bought from. And as you can see, what it shows that, regardless of price, whether it's a few thousands of dollars on the far left or millions on the far right, there's definitely both. There's human and self-guided. So what that tells you is marketing has to play a really big role in making sure that the digital self-guided experiences that they're providing are the right types, the right levels. And secondly, that those digital efforts are aligned with the human interactions that they're having with sales. That alignment, that focus is what's going to make for a good digital experience for your customers. When you look at what that means to own the digital buyer's journey, marketing really has two jobs. The first job is to make sure that you're delivering a coherent, consistent, cohesive experience to the buyer. The buyer is looking at you as a company and they want to see an experience that moves them down that journey. And to do that effectively, marketing has to utilize marketing automation in order to deliver the right information at the right time, and at the same time make sure that these digital efforts are wrapped around the larger campaigns so that the message that's being delivered is consistent with a larger message that the company is delivering. At the same time, marketing has to listen to the buyers. The buyers are expecting an interactive experience, an ability to control and change and influence the marketing and the interactions that they're getting. So marketing can do that by delivering web content that's interactive. They can create web applications and mobile applications that takes that concept of interactivity all the way to the fore. And lastly, that interaction and that ability to influence those interactions has to extend all the way out to the human interactions that the company is providing, with marketing working closely with sales and anybody else who's speaking directly to the customer, again, to ensure that consistent message. Now, one of the questions that we get all the time is, okay, so that's great, we believe that, but what does it mean to be digital? And that's a great question because you hear digital used as a generic term, but the reality is it's different depending on the company, depending on your company, what you're selling, who's selling it, how it's bought, it's all going to be affected by that. So in order to provide some clarity and some structure to this conversation, we built what we call the digital transformation type model. And it starts by asking companies, about their products and services. What are you offering? Are you offering something that is highly customized, meaning every single individual buys something slightly different, or is it standardized and everybody buys the same thing? We also look at how differentiated it is from your competitors. Are you selling something they can only buy from you, or can they buy it from multiple people? So that tells you how complex your offering is in terms of customization and differentiation. We then take a look at the purchase complexity of your product, and we look at it from three different aspects. The first aspect is the price. Is it $1 million or $100? $1 million product is going to be more complex to buy than a $100 product. We also look at the number and the seniority of the people involved. Is this a decision made at the operational level by one person, or is this going to involve the entire C-suite and require serious discussions and a long RFP? That length of time to make that decision is also another factor in purchase complexity. And lastly, we look at how you want to go to market. Do you have all these salespeople in suits running around that are holding your customers' hands throughout the entire process, or are you expecting your customers to come to your website and find the answers themselves? By plotting your company and your businesses against this model, you'll arrive at a few models. And before we move on, I do want to note that for complex companies, it's entirely possible and actually likely that you'll have multiple models. So you're probably sitting there right now trying to do this in your head. Let's talk about what the results often say. What the results will, when we looked at the results and the standard patterns we really saw three sets. The first set is what we call digital first. Digital first is a highly transactional set of products and services. These are things that you can buy quickly. Office supplies, simple software, all of those things are digital first. When you look at the other end of it, when you're trying to sell something like a private jet, that's what we call digital support. And in digital support, you're selling something that's very complicated, very expensive, hard to buy, and it's going to take a long journey with sales to make that happen. And then in the middle, there's digital hybrid. And what we're going to do today is we're going to focus a lot on support and hybrid, and we'll go into more details on those too. So digital support. As I mentioned previously, digital support is the far end of the scale where the offering is as customized and differentiated as it gets. The purchase complexity is similarly up there on the scale, and the go-to-markets are almost always sales-driven. When you look at this, one of the things that should be striking is, digital is really important in a digital support model, but it's not the same thing as digital first. In digital support, the whole goal is to find the right people, nurture, generate that initial interest, nurture them through the process, and then work closely with sales to accelerate and close those opportunities. That's actually where the name comes from. The name comes from the focus of digital on supporting that sales process and making sure that that process happens smoothly. Now, when you look at this and you think about the implications of a digital support model, where it becomes really obvious is in the journey that your customers are going to take. In this, we've mapped both the customer and the buying journey, and we differentiate between the digital touches and the human touches that are going to happen in the course of the journey. This is a typical digital support journey. Not surprisingly, it's mostly human. The way that these things usually play out is, somebody will come see you at a trade show. Maybe that person will then ask another human, a colleague, to see how, if they have any opinions about your product. And then your salesperson will get in, and if things go well, the sale will proceed. Now, look at that first point where it jumps up to digital. This is going to happen, and what typically happens is, after the salesperson gets done making the pitch or even before, that company is going to go look on your website to verify what they're hearing from the salespeople and to make sure that you can address their issues. If that goes well, your sale is going to keep going. If that experience, that leap from human to digital is not consistent, the website doesn't support what the salesperson is saying, or worse yet, it's saying something completely different, then this deal is in jeopardy. And this highlights the critical integration between marketing and sales and marketing's role even in these highly sales-led journeys, because all of these points where you see it going to digital are typically inflection points. And marketing has to be there to support it properly, or it's going to put that sale in jeopardy. So let's look at the hybrids. The hybrids are really interesting because what we find is the majority of companies actually tend to fall in these spaces. We have three that we've identified that we typically see. The first one is what we call high purchase complexity. And high purchase complexity is when you're selling a product that's actually reasonably standardized, but it somehow has a high purchase complexity. Perhaps it's expensive. Is usually a typical case. But in this case, you're still trying to sell it a lot through self-service. One of the biggest examples of these is if you look at commodity but expensive IT goods, whether they're big servers or even big data switches. Those things could be 5 or 6 figures, but the people that are buying them buy them constantly. They know exactly what they're buying. A lot of them actually would love to just go online, push a button and buy it because they don't need a lot of sales help for that. And that's great for the buyer because the buyer is getting a smooth experience, and it's great for the company because it lowers the cost of sales. So that's high purchase complexity, and we do see a lot of that. Custom offering is the next model, and if you guys have ever seen a Vistaprint ad, you've seen this model in action. It's for companies that are creating something that's relatively inexpensive but highly customized. If you look around at your desk right now, there's probably a trade show tchotchke or giveaway that's exactly this. So you've got to help the customer in a custom offering solution navigate the different customization choices and feel comfortable that they're good and they like the product that they've actually designed through your process, good enough that they'll actually hit buy. The last model that we have here is called design-driven. And design-driven is a situation where the product is, again, reasonably standardized, but it's embedded inside a larger purchase process, which means you need salespeople to help navigate it. A really common example is electronic components being sold into a design. For those types of sales, you actually have to get into the design, which means you have to talk to the design engineer and the manufacturing engineer and the procurement people in order to sell your really simple $5 part. The same action happens in something as simple as building supplies, where if you're going to sell your product into a commercial development, you've got to deal with the architect, the engineer, the contractor, etc. Simple product, complex process. And in a design-driven scenario, digital's role is to help sales navigate that process and provide the right information to the right people at each stage of that design process. And here's an example of a typical digital hybrid flow. This one is one that you'll see a lot in design-driven and high purchase complexity. And what happens in this scenario is users end up coming to the site, coming to your site, engaging with you digitally to determine if the product you're delivering makes sense and can actually solve the problem. And once they establish that it can, they'll then reach out to sales to begin the complicated process of actually purchasing the product. But that conversation, that possibility of a sale won't happen if they don't get past that first stage, which is largely digital. So we've talked a lot about the journey. We talked about the different types of digital. It'd be a great time now to turn it over to Kevin so Kevin can walk you through how to rethink this buying journey with this digital transformation.
Great, thanks, Gil. So what we saw there is kind of a typical model for those types of profiles. And no matter what you do, the profile of what you sell will affect how the interaction of digital and human touch works. But what we'd like to do is kind of challenge the idea that that's as far as you need to go. Typically, people set up those journeys and they kind of do the things that they have to do, that their competitors do, or that have generally been accepted. But can we rethink the buyer's journey with digital transformation in mind and add more speed to customer satisfaction in the process? So the kind of context setting we like to do around that is the idea that we really should think, borrowing from Peter Drucker, that the goal of marketing is to deliver a customer who is ready to buy in that process. And so that's, ideally, we would take it that far. But what's interesting is that today we tend to have a handoff to sales that's driven differently than this statement would imply. So what typically happens is we try to be sophisticated about how we manage this process is we engage in a sales and marketing alignment process. We sit down with sales and we say, let's make sure that what marketing does is appreciated by sales and it's the right thing so that they can do their job and be productive. And so that starts with a question. When does sales want a buyer from marketing? And the answer to that is typically whenever you can establish the right mix of capacity and propensity. So capacity is this the right type of company, the right size, the right industry, such that they're the type of folks who would buy our product? And propensity is, but are they buying it now? Or did they just buy it 3 months ago and it's a 7-year cycle and there's no chance? But once you get that right combination of capacity and propensity and it gets high enough, sales generally says, hey, hand that lead over as quick as you can. I would like to start calling them and try to do my job and sell it. And there's a variety of combinations. Some things are okay if the capacity is low but the propensity is really high, then it's a fast and easy sale and they want it. And if the capacity is really high but propensity is low, the dollar figure that they're going after makes it worth it for them to nurture it through a long process. And this is a great process to go through to make sure that what marketing delivers is in accord with what sales wants. What that generally results in, though, is what we call a sales-controlled model. So you have this goal that begins to emerge, which is to get through that capacity and propensity judgment, just gather the information about their current state as quick as you can, and then hand it off to sales. And the way that happens typically is in that first chunk of the funnel, you're doing digital education. They're hitting the website, they're examining what's going on, they're figuring out if your solution is appropriate. We use in marketing things like gated content and information capture to start to capture the sense of what their capacity is by getting them answer questions and what their propensity is, looking at their digital footprints on the website, what they read, whether they downloaded a white paper. And then we do sales activation as quickly as we can out of that process. And the expectation is that there'll be a next step, which is a sales-driven fit, this process where sales gets in contact with them and starts really talking in detail about what their situation is. The problem with that is that the buyer needs to be ready for that. They need to feel like like that's an important next step for them. If we haven't provided enough information up front for them to feel good about it, then they go through an emotion in that blue bar at the bottom of reluctance. They say, well, I don't know, I'm not ready for sales. And when that happens, they either disengage from the website, go on to other things, or they start worse, they start competitive research to look at other companies that do what you do and see if they can learn what they need to there. And that whole friction and interruption stalls things out. Even if they go ahead and fill out a form because of your gated content, then you've got a struggle of nurturing and emails and multiple sales calls to try and make that contact happen. But they were never ready for it to begin with. What we think at MX is the missing piece is affinity. So capacity and propensity are fine, they're important, they're critical, you can't let them go. But affinity is, even if they're the right company and they want to buy now, do they want to buy from you? Because that's what determines whether or not they're willing to get interactive with sales in the process. So that introduction of the idea of affinity sort of flips the whole question on its head. We stop thinking about sales and marketing alignment. We start thinking about sales and marketing alignment with buyers. When does the buyer want sales in the process? And the answer to that is whenever their affinity has gotten high enough that they really would like to have that next conversation. That can lead to a number of things. There could be some leads, like in that first column, that look ready for capacity and propensity, but really we're not going to hand them off because it's just going to be a frustrating, low-value waste of time to make many phone calls. The middle one's perfect. The one on the end is interesting because that could be a prospect that really, if sales knew exactly how much they preferred your brand already and how likely they were to convert, they'd probably want to talk to them. So this whole introduction of this process just changes the thinking around what gets delivered. That results in a new tactical model for how you go about this. So digital education is the same. They're hitting your website. They're curious. But now the content is more open and available on your website. But we still have to get to fit. They have to understand what's appropriate. And the blocker there is often that it's a very interactive, complicated process. So what digital transformation brings to the table here is saying, hey, let's use digital education to lead to digital fit, where we never hit that moment of consternation where they kind of say, I'm not sure if I'm ready for sales. And by getting digitally through a self-guided fit, they get to a collaboration request, not an information capture form. I mean, think about the vocabulary we use for that, right? But actually a moment where they want to talk to sales. We still do lead qualification, and then we hand that off to sales, and that's what we start to measure as success. So what we're doing is we're building more affinity before confronting the buyer with a sales or no sales kind of decision. And the result of that, from an emotional standpoint in the bar at the bottom, is hopefully instead of entering the reluctance phase, we enter a hopeful phase. They go through a digital fit process. They're willing to do it without pause, and they start to feel excited about your product and saying, actually, this is exactly what I need. That means we don't interrupt and delay engagement. We don't. We reduce competitive research in that process. And we advance more leads down the path. There isn't such a big drop-off between digital education and the fit process because there isn't that friction point. And that means that ultimately we'll deliver more ready-to-buy leads, the goal of marketing, a ready-to-buy customer. So when we contrast these things and look at the models side by side, what we think is that what we see is that we really are trying to activate sales later in the process by focusing on affinity. And that's counterintuitive. Normally you think, hey, let me prove the worth of my marketing effort as soon as I can, as long as sales is willing to accept it. But by doing that, we thicken the funnel and by avoiding these gateways and drop-offs where people really don't continue down their journey. We also, interestingly, shorten the journey. Because they don't have those delays, those moments of competitive research, they move more quickly into sales, and sales can get things going from there. So what we learn is that by optimizing for the whole process, instead of looking at a portion of it that marketing is directly responsible for, that we end up with better results. And Gil, I think that's a good time to talk a little bit about what kind of stats we have to show that.
Sure. You know, what's the value of waiting until you've established capacity, propensity, and affinity? At Serious Decisions, we have a lead spectrum where we look at the maturity of a lead, and it fits really closely into what Kevin was talking about. You know, level one and two is when you've got the capability. You're somebody that could buy this product. 3 and 4 is when you're somebody who's interested. You know, you've got a propensity to buy. But 5 and 6, they raised their hand and they've said, you know what, we do want to talk to you. They're establishing affinity. At Serious Decisions, we've got 10 years plus of waterfall conversion rates for our customers that we can go in and do research on. So we took a study actually a few years ago of what happens to the conversion rates when you look at it by lead levels. So what's the first thing that you notice? If you look at the very bottom, the good news is the more mature the lead is before you pass it to sales, the larger percentage of wins you're going to get. That makes perfect sense, right? The downside to that, though, is if you look at the top level, if you're looking for really mature leads, those level 5 and 6s, you're going to have less marketing qualified leads from inquiries. That's just the nature of it. You're looking for a smaller set of people. But the promise that digital transformation brings to the table is perhaps we can optimize for both. While increasing the conversion rates, the closed won rates, with the right form of digital transformation, we can carry more inquiries to the right level of marketing qualified leads so we can increase that top number as well. And in order to make that digital transformation real, you're probably sitting there looking right now going, who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want larger top line and a larger bottom line? The good news is it's doable. The bad news is it's going to take some effort. And there's two big things that we really want you guys to think about when you think about embarking on this digital transformation journey. One is that you really have to understand your buyers. The best digital transformations are the ones that take what the buyer wants to do and needs to do and enable it as much as possible. It's about them, not you. The other thing that you want to think about is this is not something that marketing can go off and do by themselves, any more than sales or product marketing can do it by themselves. If you're going to make this digital transformation, it's got to start all the way from the design of the product down to the marketing, down to the sales process. This is a full company commitment, not something that you can do on your own.
So generally at a concrete level, though, how do we make digital transformation real? If we have the right context, we understand the benefit, we know how to drive through that process, we still need to know what to do. And so in focus on that funnel, what we're really doing is marketing is establishing digital fit. And so how do you do that? Well, no doubt your website is already trying to do that at some level, whether that's account-based marketing, retargeting in the process, customizations as you learn a buyer's persona. But there does seem to be a point where the thinking becomes, well, sales needs to do that from here. And why? What is the barrier that means that that's where the handoff has to happen? Well, that's where digital transformation comes in, is that we're trying to deliver that set of intelligent fit at scale. And generally, there's this kind of predisposition to think that sales is high interactivity, and it is. They have the opportunity to have good, strong conversations about what's really needed and tailor what's offered to what they need. But they have low reach. It's expensive, it's human-driven, there's only so many folks it makes sense to talk to. It's part of the reason why we have lead qualification in a funnel. Marketing is thought of as low interactivity, at least in comparison to sales, where they can hit the website, we can do marketing to a segment or a persona that's tailored to them, but in the end it's still not specific to an individual. But it's high reach. We can talk to lots of folks at a comparatively little expense. But what's really happening when sales is doing their work, if we look at the Venn diagram on the right, is there's this opportunity to fully understand the buyer situation, to bring product knowledge about the depth of your offering to bear, and then make expert decisions about what would be most appropriate here. That's what gets people into that sort of, yes, this does look like what I need. Let's engage in a real conversation that starts to get closer to close. So digital can really change the marketing side of that equation, can increase the interactivity that's going on and introduce speed and scale to this product buyer fit. But how do we do that? It's really the third bullet point here. How can marketing digitize your best salesperson? And it's a great way to think about it and a great clue to where to look within your own organization for things that you can actually effectively do. So when you think about it, digital engagement tools should listen to a buyer's needs, ask follow-up questions, demonstrate comprehension, reduce complexity, deliver insight on fit, and it's no coincidence that that sounds like a really good sales conversation. So that's great. Now we understand a bit of the theory, the idea of digitizing sales and where we go with it, but we still need concrete examples of what that might mean. And there are some repeating design patterns out there for digital applications that take it to that next interactive level that establishes fit. And these aren't the only categories or types by any means. In fact, some of the best ideas really may come from a custom analysis of what's going on in your company and what gets it done. But this is a great place to start thinking, to see some examples, and to kick off your thinking. So these tools are really, that we're showing here, are more high end of the funnel. They're early in that curiosity stage approaching digital fit. But first category here is simulations. So this is about helping the buyer to understand how a solution really works. Not just a bunch of bullet points about what the benefits are, where they're still vague on what it means, but they can really get a tangible sense of how it's going to function. Assessment is an opportunity to ask them questions so that they can clarify for themselves what their current challenges are and establish that they really do need your solution. But that doesn't mean it's worth paying for, and that's when you get into ROI calculators. Here the buyer is curious, and these are all steps in the buyer's journey, by the way, not things we want to do to them. It's things they want to establish, and that's key to the thinking. So they get into ROI and they start thinking, okay, great, I see how this works. I do have this problem. It'd be great, but is it worth the money? And the ROI calculator helps them to get through that process. Another few design patterns then tends to move towards lower funnel. Let's say that you know how it works, you know you have this problem, it looks like it's worth it. You still have to get to the point where you understand product configuration and say, yeah, but you have a variety of offerings, and so can I verify the specific products, maybe even the ballpark costs involved here, so I can say whether that seems appropriate to me and my budget. If you can get away with it, you can go all the way to e-commerce and actually close the sale, sell it online. That's more digital first in the process. And then after they convert to a customer, you can even introduce gamification, which is really just a class of things where you offer an ability for the buyer to measure their success in using your product, take different steps, and have that towed up to a score. And that has a result of confirming the direction, keeping them engaged with what you provide, so that when the next purchase decision comes along, it's sort of a foregone conclusion. So those are nice categories, but again, what does that mean? So we have a few case study examples here. So one of them is actually the MX Group, our own assessment tool. This is the Modern Marketing Assessment. Its goal is really to help with an online assessment to determine strengths, areas for improvement along the way. And what that really sort of brings to the table is it allows organizations to think about the orchestration side of digital transformation and whether they have the right tools to handle that. And its value here is comprehensiveness. We are able to introduce people to a variety of concepts they may not fully understand, and interestingly, consensus across stakeholders. Often we'll find multiple people at a company will take the test and find out they all don't agree on where they're really at. But all that helps people move towards clarity in the process. These are things that might have typically been sales conversations in the past because it was the only way to do it. But when we can put that product knowledge with the buyer situation and provide expert advice, we really start to cross that line into digital fit. Gil, I think you've got an example here as well.
Yeah, exactly. One of the example that I'd like to talk about is in that product configuration space. And it's a company called Rain for Rent. It's an industrial company, which is interesting because we tend to think of some of the best digital things coming from different types of industries. But Rain for Rent produces things like rain for the movies that you watch. If you ever watch a movie and there's a rainy scene in it, there's a decent chance it was these guys. They also do pumps for floods, all sorts of different places where you have to deal with liquids. Their traditional model was if you're going to hire them or buy one of their products, you had to call them and get an engineer because every solution was custom. You had to get on the phone, tell this person what you wanted, they would design something, send it back to you, you'd approve it, then you come back and negotiate the price. You could just tell it's a very old school, long process. Well, they took a look at cell phones and mobile phones and smartphones and said, you know what? This could really help us. And they actually built an app that you can go download on the App Store. And what it does is it lets you design and build and spec your pump on your phone. And once you're done and once you're happy with it, once you know it's going to do exactly what you need, you can take the results, the spec that you just built, push a button, send it to Rain for Rent. They'll send you a quote. And if you think about the number of steps that cuts out of the process and how much more user-friendly it is to be able to design something on the fly, on your own, without having to wait for a phone call or a call back, it's just amazing. And it's a great view of how industries outside of tech and outside of what we normally think about are taking this digital transformation concept and really applying it to real-world situations. And I think, Kevin, you've got another example as well?
Yeah, this one's more at the customer level. So a client of ours, NGC, has an example of gamification. Here, what we did was we built a demand pull application. These guys do grading of collectibles, particularly coins. They establish condition, authenticity, and value for high-end collectibles. And what we did was build an application that allows collectors to develop a set of coins, to enter the coins that they own to score them and compete against other coin collectors. So what we did was really gamify the result of collecting. It allowed customers to measure their success in what they were doing, to compare that with a community of other people who actually care about coin collecting as opposed to probably their family. And customer demand here was enhanced so strongly that actually the market price of coins that had been graded by our customer was driven upwards by the existence of this application, because it made each next purchase a foregone conclusion. Of course I'm buying a coin that was certified by NGC. So that gives you, I think, some concrete examples of what it really means to start to develop digital transformation. Some of them are fairly common types of categories. Maybe the gamification gives you an insight into something that's very custom to a business. But there still is a big question, which is how do I pay for that? And for that, we really like people to think about changing the budget conversation. So in the left-hand column, we have what we call Horizon 1 investments. And this is where most of marketing lives. Horizon 1 means you're going to get payback from this process in a year. And it's generally paid out of the operating expenses. And you're held accountable for performance. Can you hit your revenue goals? And you're held accountable for productivity. Can you minimize costs in that process? And lots of things we do in marketing fall into that bucket. Campaigns, market activation, webinars, telemarketing. Usually that budget is set so that you can help the enterprise do what it needs to do, which is sell as much as it needs to for that year. Then you look up and you say, hey, I'd like to digitally transform a little bit. And you say, but I don't have any budget for it. And if I do take budget away from the other things I'm doing, I might miss my performance goals and my metrics. Some of these digital transformation tools are small enough, simple enough, direct enough that you can pay for them out of a Horizon 1, and you should. But there's others, some of the examples we saw actually just now, that are complex enough that you really have to think of them as Horizon 2. Something that you can think of as capital expenditure, it's going to have a payback over a number of years, and that really transforms what you can do with your product. We're used to some things like that, like new websites or content management systems, that we generally think if I'm going to redo that whole thing, of course it's not a one-year expenditure, I get extra budget for that. And yet, almost everything else that we do, it's a struggle. So what we really recommend is that you use this concept to help your organizations understand that marketing needs a consistent Horizon 2 budget. They need to be thinking about transformation as much as the rest of the operation is. And they need to sort of divide that thinking into pools of money that enable that process. So look for your budget not just by feeling frozen by cannibalizing what you have. Help the organization to understand that there's something else that needs to go on there. So Gil, I think we've done some pretty good keys to success. Or you want to cover a couple of these?
Sure. You know, as we showed earlier today, one of the big things you've got to think about with digital transformation is the fact that it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. What you've got to do is understand exactly your digital type so that you can apply the right digital strategies that will enable that type. The other thing that we definitely want you to think about is the fact that making digital engagement more important, more capable, more effective is going to help you close sales faster. You know, buyers are preferring clearly digital engagement earlier in the cycle, and if you can be there for them, they're more likely to actually make it to the point where they're talking to your sales team. The other is what we find is, you know, as you can see from the data that we showed, the more informed and the more affinity the customers have for you, the better. And all of those things are things that you can do using digital engagement.
Yeah, that right mix of tools is what delivers ready to buy, helping them pass that friction point with sales and continuing from there. And that digital transformation just really improves conversion rates and revenue growth across the board. So that's our presentation for the day.
Well, that was great. Thank you so much. Well, we packed a lot into that webinar. And I can tell you as a marketer, and maybe for many of you on the phone, I think it's great that there's things that we can do as marketing to both simultaneously, you know, support buyers in their needs for information, as well as helping sales do an even better job because we reduce that friction with these tools. So that's great. So what I'd like to do is open it up to questions. And would keep this quick, but we do have a couple here. You guys decide how you want to answer this. I have one.
And if anybody has additional questions, you can type them into the webinar
at
panel.
Any point, type them in.
Don't necessarily wait for voice in the process. Just type them in and we'll start going through them.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
So here's the first one we have here. I know I like how you're introducing affinity into the sales process, but capacity and propensity are easily measured. Is there a way to measure affinity?
Yeah, that is actually kind of something that you have to move towards. Measuring affinity is really about determining the willingness of the customer to engage with you. And I think the best way to do that is to move your content from gateway and information capture towards the idea that they're volunteering for that conversation. As you set that process up, you don't want to just run straight to, okay, everything's ungated and that's all that's going to happen. Because you still need to get them from anonymous to known so that you can nurture to them and market to them even if they're not ready to talk to sales. But what you can start to do is to provide those forms in a way in which people can express their preference. Do they want to be marketed to? Do they want sales to contact them? Are they willing to have sales contact them? What you're going to learn from that, perhaps many of you will learn from that, is that many people will say no. That's actually okay. That means that you're capturing their information, moving them to known early in the process so that you can market and nurture to them and target to them appropriately. But it just means that they're not there yet. And that's what allows you to take a hard look at what you have on your website and say, hey, what am I missing from a digital fit perspective? What is missing that doesn't get them to affinity? And can I introduce those things? And as you introduce those things, you'll start to get captures from them as they fill out forms, even if you're still introducing them as a barrier that says, yes, I'm willing to talk, yes, I'm willing to talk. As you prove to yourself that you really have affinity, you can make the content more open, you can drop the gateways, and you can say, look, we've learned enough about what to implement to get people to this point, we're good. And so I think that process is what helps you measure it and helps you learn about it and helps you continue to innovate to get closer to it.
That's great. So Gil, here's a question that came through for you. It has to do with the digital types that you talked about. It says, what happens if we have more than one type in our company? I know you even mentioned sometimes big companies do have that going on. So, what do you do when you've got that going on?
Sure. Step one, don't panic. It's actually fairly normal, right? Because a lot of companies have products that span different markets and different levels in the organization, for example. The first thing that you have to do when you realize you have multiple models is you have to acknowledge the fact that different models have different needs. For example, if you're digital first, you're going to need to be really proficient in e-commerce. It's just a requirement. On the other side, if you're digital support, you're going to need to have people that can create a nurture flow, can build a long-term engagement with the customer. So step one, acknowledge the different types that you've got and make sure that you have the tools, resources, and people required to support each of those independently. The second thing, though, is as much as possible, try to build a common base, because there are things that you want common regardless of how many types you've got. For example, you want your data structures to be pretty close to similar because you want to be able to compare those different things. You want a really common infrastructure, common web content management system, CMS or CRM, map, all of those things, because very few companies can afford to have a different technology stack for each type. So in a nutshell, the important thing to do is acknowledge the differences and support them, but where possible, work towards a common set of tools, processes, and structures to make sure that you can efficiently serve all the types and also compare and contrast the performance and needs between the rest.
That's great. Thank you. I think we have time for one more quick question here. Kevin, this might fall into your camp. It says, some of these digital tools like that product fit app seem pretty complicated. Do I have to be a technical person to even start the process?
Yeah, good question. Definitely no. You don't have to be technical in the process. What you need to have is a vision for what the app could be. And investigating the sales process makes that really simple to understand what's being done by humans instead of approaching it as a technology question. But you do need to have people who will help you bridge the gap and help you discover what's possible and what's worth it, what's profitable along the way. And I see a few different models that happen generally in the world. A lot of times you'll see marketing will go to IT and say, I really need X. And IT will say, well, why don't you tell me exactly what you want me to build and how it should work, and all these conversations that become that technical component. And that turns into a blocker that just never really happens. Also, I'll see people will get in contact with outsources, like a more traditional agency that does a little bit of interactive. They do websites. They have some chops to do it, and then often they'll say things like, "We have a partner who will help us do something more complicated." But they can't really engage with you as a partner to help realize the vision. If you go down another road and say, "Let me get a custom software developer," they should really know what can be built. They tend to be a little bit more like IT. Well, you tell us what you want it to do, we'll write all that down, we'll get to coding. So I think what's really important here is not that you become technical in the process. What's important is that you find a partner who can really think about and understand what your promise is to the marketplace, what your brand is trying to deliver, why what you're trying to do is super important to affinity and a kind of aha moment about what they're trying to do, and then help to bring that together to marry it with what technology can do so that you can find digital transformation.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for your time, everyone, today. I would just like to give you some information on how to follow up with us if you're interested. Thank you so much, Gil, for all of your insights. And for those of you that are interested in actually checking out one of these tools that we talked about today, you can actually take our Modern Marketing Assessment and check it out. We also have the blog, of course, and we have resources on our website. So we thank you very much for your time, and thank you.